how to turn an idea into a poem in 3 simple steps. It can be quite daunting to have an idea of what you want to write, but just have no idea how to turn it into a poem, and it can feel quite like it's just a talent that's reserved for, a few natural poets, and you have no way of being able to do it. It's something you're inherently born with, the ability to just write a beautiful poem. But it's not. It's something that you learn, and anybody can learn it, and I wholeheartedly believe that. I'm currently recording a series of my Read and Write Tarot series, which I will link in the description below. Within that, I don't actually go into how to take the ideas and inspiration that you get from those videos and actually put them into a poem. So that's why I'm creating this video, as a little resource for you to actually be able to take the inspiration and create something out of it if that's something that you struggle with. So let's get into it. Now, usually poems have 2 main themes. Some will have a lot more, some will just have one. It varies massively, but for the sake of a beginner, I think it's good to focus on 2 themes and leave it at that. So you've got your main theme that the poem is about, and then you've got a metaphorical bit that you can kind of use to weave in and out of your main theme and to add some poetical interest to your work. I've got my laptop here and I'm going to keep referring to it because brain fog, I can't remember all this amount of information. So theme 1 should be something that's meaningful to you. So it could be grief, it could be the love that you have for your family or children, it could be the feeling of shame after a drunken night out. So if you want more ideas on what theme 1 could be, then I would encourage you to check out my Read and Write Tarot playlist, because that will give you inspiration for all of this. And theme 2 should be the metaphorical element of the writing. So it could be a god or a goddess, it could be your garden in summertime, it could be a moon phase, it could be the sea, it could be anything. And again, you will find inspiration for that in my Read and Write Tarot playlist. So once you have decided on your 2 main themes, you can just spend a bit of time thinking about them and brainstorming all the things that those 2 themes mean to you. So just write down everything that you can think of about those themes and try and start to forge some links between them. Write down the words and feelings you associate with both of them, which will ensure that you have enough flesh to link them together into a coherent poem that makes some kind of sense. So with whatever metaphorical theme you choose, it's good to do a little research and pick out some things that you find interesting and that you think you could incorporate into your poem. So this might sound a bit confusing, so I'll give you an example of my own. My theme 1 was my most recent panic attack, and theme 2 was the sun. So my list of random facts and random things that I brainstormed is the sun will expand eventually, consuming the planets, which is something that I researched and found really interesting about the sun. The sun is a near perfect sphere. I liked the idea of it being a near perfect sphere. I don't know why, that just stood out to me when it said near perfect. I don't know. Heat, obviously, pounding chest, heart beating, sweating, it all being way too much. The circular thing, a heart and the heart and the sun. Wanting it to end, the idea of throwing something away, maybe into the sky. That was my kind of jumbled random list of things. It can be much, much longer than that. Just put as much in as you like. Step 2 is to put it in order. A poem should usually tell a story. So now it's time to gather everything that you've just jotted down and try to make it flow into a bit of a narrative. You want the tension to build throughout, and you want the climax usually to be the final lines. So you can put your notes in some kind of order now. The way that I did this with that rambling list, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, no, 6. So I've got 6 bullet points in order. So the first one is introduce me and the panic attack. The second one is introduce the sun. Put that it's a circle and link to the heart, so link, string all those bits together. 3 is sweating, face and armpits and being too hot. 4 is the heat building. 5, really wanting it to end. It's getting too much now. 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Yeah, there was 7. Number 6 is tearing it out of my chest and flinging it into the sky, because I loved that imagery. It just kind of popped into my head and I was like, the heart and the sky, what's a really visceral kind of way of linking those two together. And then finally the expansion of the sun, once it's in the sky. So that's a loose summary of just how you can take your random wobbling notes and link them into some kind of coherent structure. Now, it's very important to not be afraid to kill your darlings, as they always say. So make sure that if you have any words or phrases that are completely surplus to requirements and you think, oh, these just don't fit in, just be honest about it. You can always copy and paste them into another Word document. I've got loads of folders that are called rejects, or like random notes on this, that or the other. And I do sometimes go back to them when I'm struggling for inspiration. So yeah, don't be afraid to just get rid of things that don't fit. But we'll go more into that soon. So step 3, of course, is to flesh it out. What you need to do now is to make your notes into a bare bones first draft. Just write what you want to include in each line. You don't have to think too much about the form or the language that you're using unless something brilliant pops into your head, in which case, of course, write it down. This is just to get you started, but of course the process of writing your first draft is so much easier now that you've done a bit of planning. And don't be afraid to shift things around if you want to as you go, but just start to flesh it out a bit now. My bare bones first draft is: my chest is pounding, I panic. My heart is a circle, burning like the sun. Making my face and armpits sweat. The heat is too much, I want it to end. I want to tear out my chest into the sky where it will expand and consume the planets. And you see that is incredibly bare bones, but it is a first draft. So once you've done this stage and you've fleshed it out, this is a very, very basic first draft. So congratulations, you have turned your random idea into a bare bones first draft. So the bonus next step, which I shall include, is to edit. And this is the final step, because this is the one that you'll basically be able to do forever. You will never finish editing a poem, but you can get it up to a point where you're happy for other people to consume it. So that's the main focus of the editing stage. The editing process to me is where the real poetry is. This is where you can get really flowery and beautiful with your language. This is where you can really pare it down to that beautiful, sweet little nectar that is the perfect word and the perfect imagery and just So the editing phase is actually my favourite. Look at other poems for inspiration. And I don't think it's cheating at all. I think it's incredibly important for poets to read poetry. So read other poems for inspiration. You can look at their use of language and you can, copy it essentially. I know copying's a really dirty word, but you can take a lot of inspiration from the language that poets use that you feel really drawn to. You can look at the way that they include metaphor. You can look at how they weave together all their separate themes and use that as inspiration for your own. But it is important not to compare, because if you are a beginner poet, which most people watching this will be, you're not going to write something as good as them unless you're like Sylvia Plath. So don't be disheartened if you don't write something as wonderful as, Sylvia Plath. So don't feel guilty at all about the kind of copying or taking a lot of inspiration from people, because all artists and writers do this in one way or another, whether it be conscious or subconscious. That's just how art is made. So a poem that I used as the inspiration for my editing process was Valentine by Caroline Duffy. She talks about an onion and she writes, "It is a moon wrapped in brown paper," which I thought was a really wonderful and short, to the point metaphor. I changed my cumbersome first line, which was, "My chest is pounding, I panic. My heart is a circle burning like the sun," to, "The sun burns in my chest, a sphere more perfect than any found in nature, feverish," which is just so much more poetic and beautiful and metaphorical. You can use as many poems as you want for inspiration. Leave it, come back to it another day with fresh eyes, and I find that sometimes doing nothing is the most productive thing you can do on a poem. Just leave it for a bit. You can decide that the themes don't work after all, you can turn it into something else. And I think the main thing to remember is that the poem is yours. You can do what you want with it, you own it. Don't be intimidated by it. It's yours and it's wonderful, no matter what anyone says. You might also want to pay a bit of attention to the form of your poem. Most poems these days don't follow a very strict, rigid structure. There are lots of exceptions, obviously, but it doesn't have to follow a set structure. The number one thing that I would say about the form of your poem and the kind of cadence of it is read it out loud. If you read it out loud how it's supposed to be read, then you will hear if something's wrong. And you'll be able to pick it up and realise, oh, that sounds too cumbersome, that sounds ridiculous, that these really jarring sounds. So that is my biggest piece of advice when editing poetry, is to always read it out loud. So it took me around 3 days, I would say, to get my poem up to something that I was semi-happy with. So I'll read you out what I ended up with. "The sun burns in my chest, a sphere more perfect than any found in nature, feverish, causing beads of sweat to run down my face and gather in ditches under my arms. How I long to rip it out and hurl it back into the sky, where it will grow, expanding and consuming at a furious rate, from dwarf to giant, greedy, guzzling, Mercury, Venus, then Earth." And there we have it. So please leave a comment letting me know if this was helpful, if it's given you a bit more confidence in being methodical about... Let me know if it's given you more confidence in your ability to actually construct a poem. It just takes a little bit of practice, a little bit of time, and following this method until you're used to it and you can tweak the rules according to your own desires, I suppose. So this is obviously not the only way of doing this. There are loads of different ways that you can write poems, but I just find that this method really helps me, and it's something I've developed kind of naturally. It's just something I started to do. I never learnt it anywhere particularly, but it's just, a method I've developed over the years basically, and it just makes sense to me. So if you think this video was helpful, please give it a big thumbs up and like, that's the same thing, and subscribe for more, and follow me on Instagram at rgwoodwit. So thank you ever so much for watching, happy writing, and I shall see you again very soon.